The galaxy was filled with many powerful empires, each proud of their fleets, their armies, and their long traditions. Among them was the Starborn Empire, ruled by Queen Alira. She was a tall and graceful leader, with silver eyes that glowed like stars and a crown that shone with ancient jewels of her people. She had ruled with wisdom and strength, and her subjects loved her dearly. To them, she was more than a queen. She was a symbol of unity, guiding her empire through both peace and storm. Her court was filled with generals, scholars, and diplomats from across the stars. They expected her one day to choose a partner from one of the great noble houses, perhaps a prince of another alien kingdom or a mighty warrior who had proven himself in battle. Instead, Queen Alira made a choice that shocked the entire empire. She chose to marry a human named Daniel. Daniel was unlike the tall and mighty figures of other alien rulers. He was shorter, his skin plain, his hair dark, and his body seemed fragile compared to the strong alien warriors who could bend steel with their hands. He was quiet, polite, and often stood in the background during ceremonies. To the nobles and soldiers of the empire, he looked weak. They whispered among themselves that the queen had made a mistake. Why would the ruler of such a grand empire tie herself to a man from a small and struggling world? But Queen Alira did not listen to their doubts. She saw something in Daniel that none of them understood. She saw his steady eyes when danger rose, the calm way he faced challenges, and the warmth in his voice when he spoke of peace. He did not seek power or glory, yet he carried a quiet strength inside him that drew her closer. When he smiled, it was not the smile of a courtier seeking favor but of a man who wished to share kindness. That was why she had chosen him. The day of their wedding was unlike any other in the empire. Great banners of blue and silver were raised across the capital city. Ships from allied worlds circled the skies, their lights shining in celebration. The queen's people filled the streets, dressed in bright robes, carrying flowers that glowed softly in the night. Music rose from every corner, filling the air with hope and joy. The marriage was more than a union between two souls. It was meant to be a symbol of peace between humans and the Starborn, a promise that two very different races could walk the same path. Daniel stood at the center of it all, dressed in a simple robe of white and gold. He did not wear heavy armor like the alien generals, nor did he carry any weapon. He stood with dignity, his eyes calm and his heart steady. Queen Alira entered the grand hall where the wedding was to be held, her gown woven with silver threads that shone like starlight. She walked past rows of nobles and soldiers, who bowed deeply as she passed, though many of them still hid doubt in their hearts. When she reached Daniel, their eyes met. She smiled, and he returned it with warmth. The ceremony began. Priests of the empire raised their hands and spoke of the joining of worlds, the balance of strength and wisdom, the union of spirit and heart. When Daniel placed his hand on hers, many in the hall whispered again, surprised at how small his hand looked compared to hers. Yet the queen held his hand firmly, showing that her choice was not one of weakness but of conviction. As the vows were spoken, Daniel did not use grand words. He simply promised that he would stand by her side, that he would protect her not only with action but with heart, and that he would never turn away in times of hardship. His words were plain, but they carried truth. The queen felt their power more strongly than any speech of a noble or general. She answered with her own vow, swearing to honor him as partner and to let their marriage guide the path of peace between their peoples. When the vows ended, the great hall erupted with light. Crystals above the throne shone brighter than ever before, and the sound of bells filled the air. The empire had witnessed something that had never been done in all its history. Their queen, the strongest of rulers, had chosen a human to stand beside her as king consort. Some clapped and cheered, others stood in silence, but all knew that a new chapter had begun. After the ceremony, a feast was held in the royal garden. Long tables stretched under trees whose leaves glowed softly in the night air. Food from many worlds was served, fruits that shimmered like jewels, bread that steamed with golden light, and drinks that sparkled as if stars had been captured in a glass. Musicians played songs of unity, and dancers moved gracefully, their steps telling stories of old battles and hard-won peace. Daniel sat beside the queen, speaking kindly to those who approached. He listened with patience, answering questions about Earth, his people, and his life before the marriage. Some nobles tried to test him with sharp words, asking why a man of no power or title should sit beside their queen. Daniel did not grow angry or defensive. He simply spoke of his world, of the courage of humans who had faced countless struggles, of their ability to endure storms, and of their unyielding hope. His calm words left some thoughtful, though others still shook their heads. As the night went on, Queen Alira watched him with pride. She saw how he carried himself with dignity, how he did not falter under doubt, and how he gave respect even to those who did not show it to him. She knew that her choice had been right, though she also knew that challenges would come. The empire was vast, and not all would accept him quickly. Still, she believed in him, and that belief was unshakable. Far beyond the garden, however, shadows were gathering. The queen's rival, an ambitious warlord from a distant empire, had heard of her marriage. To him, it was a sign of weakness. He laughed when his spies told him that the mighty queen had chosen a human as her husband. He began to plan, thinking this was the perfect time to strike. He believed the Starborn Empire would crumble, and he intended to lead the attack that would bring them down. But for that night, in the royal garden, peace filled the air. The queen and her human husband sat together, surrounded by light, music, and the hope of two worlds. She did not yet know the trials that would soon come. He did not yet reveal the strength that lay hidden inside him. Still, the bond between them was real, and it was the first spark of a fire that would one day surprise the entire galaxy. The celebration of the Queen's marriage lasted for many days, but peace never lingered long in the galaxy. Beyond the shining borders of the Starborn Empire, an old rival watched with growing hunger. The rival was a warlord named Korvac, ruler of the Iron Dominion, a brutal power that believed in conquest above all else. He had long feared Queen Alira's strength, for her fleets were disciplined and her armies loyal. Yet when he heard she had taken a human as her husband, he laughed with scorn. To him, this was proof that her empire was weakening. He began to prepare for war. In the capital city of Lumerus, the Queen's advisors gathered in the Grand Council Hall. Maps of star systems stretched across glowing tables, showing trade routes, colonies, and defenses. Generals in silver armor spoke in serious tones. Reports told of Dominion fleets massing near the border worlds. Scouts had vanished, colonies had gone silent, and strange signals filled the void of space. The threat was clear. War was coming. Queen Alira stood tall at the head of the council. Her eyes swept across her commanders, her voice calm but firm. She declared that the empire would not surrender to threats. They would defend their people and hold their worlds. Her words gave strength to many, yet doubt still crept through the council. Their whispers rose again, this time sharper than before. Some pointed at Daniel, who sat quietly beside the queen. They said the warlord Korvac had chosen this moment because of him. They said a human could never inspire fear in the hearts of enemies. Daniel listened without anger. He knew he was seen as weak among them. He did not argue or boast. Instead, he watched and learned. He studied the maps, the movements of fleets, and the lines of defense. The Queen noticed his quiet focus, though she did not yet understand what plans were forming in his mind. The first attacks came swiftly. Dominion raiders struck border outposts, burning villages and tearing through defenses. Refugees poured into the empire, telling of iron ships that filled the skies and soldiers who showed no mercy. The starborn fleets launched to meet them, and great battles erupted among the stars. Yet for every victory, more enemy ships appeared. The Dominion was vast, its war machine endless. The Queen fought on the front lines, leading her fleet with courage. Her command ship soared through battles, its cannons blazing with energy. Her soldiers cheered when they saw her standing firm, her silver eyes glowing with determination. Yet even as victories were won, the weight of the war grew heavier. The Dominion pressed harder, and the Empire's resources stretched thin. Daniel remained at the Queen's side, not on the battlefield but within the heart of strategy. He walked the halls of the command center, listening to officers, studying reports, and asking questions about supplies, troop movements, and enemy tactics. Some mocked him, saying his words were simple, but he did not mind. He was patient, and he kept his thoughts close. One night, as the Queen returned from a battle, weary from endless struggle, she found Daniel waiting in the war room. He held no weapon, but in his eyes there was a light she had not seen before. He spoke softly, yet his words carried weight. He reminded her that humans on Earth had faced great challenges. They had survived storms, wars, and trials across centuries. Their strength was not in mighty bodies or endless fleets but in endurance and creativity. He told her that the Dominion's strength was great, but even the strongest armies had weaknesses if one looked closely. The Queen listened, though doubt still tugged at her heart. She admired his spirit, but she wondered if spirit alone could stand against fleets of iron. Still, his calm gave her comfort, and she found herself leaning on his words more than she expected. As weeks passed, the war deepened. The Dominion pushed further into starborn space, taking planets and scattering defenders. The people of the Empire grew fearful. Some whispered that their queen's marriage had cursed them, that the gods had turned their backs. The nobles grew restless, and the generals argued fiercely over strategy. Some demanded stronger weapons, others wanted to retreat and protect only the capital. Unity began to fracture. It was during this time of despair that Daniel revealed a glimpse of his hidden strength. When the generals argued, raising voices and pounding fists, he rose from his seat. His voice was not loud, yet it silenced the hall. He pointed to the maps, showing the movements of Dominion fleets. He explained patterns he had seen, weaknesses in supply lines, and blind spots in their formations. His words were clear and simple, but they carried logic that could not be ignored. The generals looked at each other, surprised that the human had seen what they had missed. The Queen's eyes widened as she watched him. She had known he was observant, but she had not realized how deeply he studied the art of war. When he finished speaking, the hall was silent. Even the harshest of his critics could not deny the truth in his analysis. Though some still resisted his presence, many began to look at him with new respect. Soon after, the Dominion launched a massive strike against the outer colonies. The Queen led her fleet to intercept, and Daniel was at her side, offering his insights. The battle was fierce, with iron warships pressing hard against starborn defenses. Yet when Daniel's suggestions were followed, the tide shifted. He had instructed the fleet to strike at supply ships hidden behind the enemy lines, and when those ships fell, the Dominion forces faltered. For the first time in weeks, the empire won a clear and decisive victory. The queen stood upon her command deck, her eyes on Daniel as he watched the battle unfold. She felt pride, not only for the triumph of her people but for the man she had chosen. Still, she sensed that what he had shown was only the beginning. He carried within him a strength not yet fully revealed, a strength that might one day change the course of the war. Far away, in the heart of the Dominion, warlord Korvac slammed his fist upon his throne. Reports of his defeat reached him, and he scowled at the mention of the human consort. He had laughed at the queen's choice before, but now he grew wary. He swore that he would crush the Starborn Empire and prove that no human could ever stand in his path. He gathered more fleets, greater armies, and vowed to strike at the capital itself. In the halls of the empire, the whispers did not stop, but a new tone began to rise among them. Some still doubted, but others began to wonder if perhaps the human was more than he seemed. The queen held her head high, her hand resting gently on Daniel's, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe that his strength might one day shine brighter than any star in the galaxy. The war spread like fire across the stars. Colony after colony called for help, their voices trembling with fear. The Iron Dominion pressed forward, its fleets moving like storms, darkening the skies of every world they touched. The Starborn Empire resisted with all its strength, but the enemy seemed endless. Each victory felt smaller than the last, each loss heavier than before. Queen Alira carried the weight of her empire on her shoulders. Every morning she rose before the sun and stepped into the war chamber, where maps glowed with red and blue lights. The red lights marked the Dominion's advance, and each day the red spread wider. Her generals stood around a table, their faces grim, their voices sharp. They gave reports of lost ships, broken defenses, and citizens fleeing from burning cities. Alira listened to every word, her silver eyes calm but her heart heavy. She gave orders, shifting fleets, calling reinforcements, and demanding that no world be left undefended. Her voice never trembled, yet inside she felt the crushing pressure of doubt. She was the queen. She could not show weakness, not to her generals, not to her people, not even to herself. Daniel stayed by her side, quiet as always. He did not wear the armor of the generals, nor did he command ships. He sat near the edge of the war table, listening carefully. Many forgot he was there, dismissing him as a shadow. But Alira did not forget. She felt his presence like a steady flame at her side, reminding her that she was not alone, even if the galaxy tried to make her feel otherwise. At night, when the halls grew silent and the candles burned low, Alira walked through the royal gardens to find a moment of peace. The trees glowed softly with silver leaves, and fountains whispered gentle songs. She often found Daniel waiting there, sitting on the stone benches beneath the stars. He would rise when she came near, his eyes filled with quiet concern. "You carry too much," he said one evening, his voice soft. "I am the queen," she answered, trying to smile. "It is my duty to carry everything." "Even queens are human in heart," Daniel replied. "Even queens need rest, even queens need someone to share the weight." She looked at him for a long moment. He was not tall like her warriors, not powerful like her generals, but when he spoke she felt her heart ease, if only for a little while. She sat beside him, and together they watched the stars. He told her stories of Earth, of how his people had faced storms and wars, of how they had rebuilt again and again no matter how many times they were struck down. He spoke not with pride but with quiet certainty, as if resilience was simply a part of being human. Alira listened, feeling warmth in his words, but still the doubts pressed in her mind. Could such resilience stand against an empire as vast as the Dominion? The days grew darker. The Dominion broke through another line of defense, this time reaching the outer rings of the capital system. Refugees poured into Lumerus, filling the streets with fear. The once bright city dimmed under the shadow of war. Markets closed, schools emptied, and families huddled together, unsure if tomorrow would bring safety or fire. The queen walked among her people, wearing a simple cloak instead of her crown. She listened to their cries, their anger, their despair. Some begged her to end the war, even if it meant surrender. Others demanded vengeance, calling for harsher strikes against the Dominion. Every word cut into her heart. She wished she could give them peace, but peace was no longer in her hands. One evening, after a long day of council, Alira returned to her chamber and stood before the great window that overlooked the city. The lights of the capital spread out below her like stars, but they no longer felt like a source of hope. They felt fragile, like candles waiting to be blown out. She pressed her hand against the glass, her shoulders heavy with weariness. Daniel entered quietly, carrying no torch or crown, only his steady presence. He walked to her side and looked out at the city with her. "They still believe in you," he said. "They are afraid," Alira replied. "I see it in their eyes. They whisper that their queen is failing them. And perhaps they are right." "You are not failing them," Daniel said firmly. "You fight for them every day. You give them courage by standing tall. But you cannot do this alone. No one can." She turned to him, searching his face. "And what would you have me do, Daniel? The Dominion comes with endless fleets. My armies fight bravely, but each battle costs us dearly. I am strong, but I am not endless. I do not know if even my empire can withstand this storm." Daniel looked at her with calm, unwavering eyes. "On Earth, we faced storms we thought would destroy us. Disasters, wars, endless struggles. We survived because we never gave up. That is what humans do. We endure. We adapt. We rise again when everything says we should fall. That strength is not mine alone. It belongs to all of my people, and it can belong to your people too, if they believe." Alira felt his words settle in her heart. She wanted to believe them, yet the burden still pressed upon her. She wondered if his human spirit could truly stand against the iron might of the Dominion. But in that moment, she realized that his presence gave her something she had not felt in weeks: hope. The next morning, Alira returned to the council with her head high. She ordered new strategies, sharper defenses, and calls for unity among her people. She spoke with a fire that surprised even her generals. Though the shadow of war loomed closer, she refused to let despair rule her. Still, as the Dominion fleets gathered at the edge of the capital system, she knew the hardest trials were yet to come. The empire stood on the brink of collapse, and her choices would decide its fate. In the quiet of the night, she lay awake beside Daniel, listening to the distant hum of the city. Her heart carried fear, but also something new. She did not yet know what strength her human husband held within him, but she began to sense that when the darkest hour came, he might reveal it. And when he did, it could change the destiny of not only the empire but the galaxy itself. The war drew closer to the heart of the Starborn Empire. The Iron Dominion sent larger fleets, their ships like iron blades cutting deeper into the Queen's realm. Colonies burned, trade routes collapsed, and even loyal allies began to waver in their support. The capital city, Lumerus, felt the weight of fear pressing down. Every day the people looked to their queen, wondering if she could protect them from the storm that grew darker by the hour. Queen Alira did not retreat. She led from the front, standing tall in her shining armor, commanding fleets with precision and courage. Yet even with her strength, the empire trembled. The Dominion fought with cruelty and endless numbers. It seemed as if no wall could hold them back forever. Daniel watched all of this with quiet eyes. He walked the halls of the command center, listening, learning, and thinking. Many still dismissed him, calling him a symbol rather than a soldier. They saw only a human, fragile and small compared to the towering warriors of the Starborn. But Daniel did not argue. He let them underestimate him. He knew that his moment would come. That moment arrived when the Dominion launched a sudden strike against the royal city itself. Their fleet bypassed outer defenses and appeared in orbit above Lumerus, their weapons ready to reduce the capital to ash. Panic spread through the city. Families rushed into shelters, sirens blared, and soldiers scrambled to defend their queen. The air shook with the sound of approaching war. Alira stood on the command deck of her flagship, her eyes fixed on the great screens that showed enemy ships filling the skies. Her generals spoke rapidly, some calling for retreat, others demanding to throw every last ship into the fight. Confusion filled the room, and for a moment, it seemed the empire might crumble before the first shots were even fired. Then Daniel stepped forward. His voice was steady, cutting through the noise. "You cannot meet them head-on," he said. "Their strength is in their numbers. If you fight them where they are strongest, you will lose." The generals turned to him in anger. "You are no soldier," one barked. "You have never fought a battle in space. How dare you give commands to us?" But Daniel did not back down. He walked to the war table and pointed at the glowing map. "Look here," he said. "Their supply ships hide behind the fleet, unguarded because they think you will never reach them. Strike there, and the rest will falter. Use small, fast ships, not the great heavy ones. Hit them where they do not expect. Make them fight in chaos, not in order. That is how humans fight when we face stronger enemies. That is how we survive." The generals grew silent. His plan was bold, risky, and unlike anything they had considered. Queen Alira's eyes never left Daniel. She could see the fire in his gaze, a fire of certainty. At last she raised her hand. "We will follow his plan," she said firmly. "Prepare the strike." The fleet moved quickly. While the main starborn ships held their position to distract the Dominion, smaller, faster vessels slipped through hidden paths in the asteroid fields that circled the system. Guided by Daniel's strategy, they struck at the supply ships hidden behind the enemy lines. Explosions lit the dark, and the Dominion fleet staggered. Without supplies, their weapons slowed, their movements broke apart, and their iron discipline faltered. The Queen seized the moment. She led her main fleet in a sudden counterattack, pressing against the weakened enemy. The skies above Lumerus became a storm of fire and light. Starborn ships fought with renewed courage, their queen's command sharp as a blade. By the end of the battle, the Dominion retreated, leaving behind shattered vessels burning in the void. Cheers filled the capital. Soldiers cried out the queen's name, and for the first time in weeks, the people felt hope. Yet in the council hall, all eyes turned to Daniel. The human who had been dismissed now stood at the center of victory. Some still frowned, but many bowed their heads in respect. That night, after the battle, Alira walked with Daniel through the quiet halls of the palace. The city outside still glowed with lights of celebration, but within the palace, there was peace. She turned to him, her silver eyes shining. "You saved my empire today," she said. "Without your plan, the city would have fallen. Daniel shook his head. It was not me alone. Your people fought with courage. They carried the plan, not me. I only saw the weakness of the enemy. But no one else saw it, Alira replied. She stepped closer, her voice softer. You carry within you a strength that no one here understands. Even I did not see it fully until today. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Strength is not always in the arm or the weapon, he said. Sometimes it is in the mind, sometimes in the heart. Humans learned long ago that we cannot always be the strongest, but we can be clever, and we can endure. That is our strength. The queen felt his words settle deep in her heart. She had always known there was something different about him, something unseen. Now she had begun to glimpse it. She realized that his strength was not one of muscle or size, but of spirit, of resilience, of a will that would not bend. In the days that followed, Daniel's presence in the council grew stronger. The generals listened when he spoke, even if grudgingly. The people began to whisper his name with respect. They said perhaps the queen's choice had not been foolish after all. But far away, in the fortress of the Dominion, warlord Korvac heard of his defeat. He raged at the news that a human had turned the tide of battle. He swore he would crush the Starborn Empire and tear down the human who dared stand against him. He began to gather a fleet larger than any seen before, a storm meant to break the capital and the queen forever. The queen did not yet know of the full storm that was coming. She only knew that her empire still stood, and that beside her was a man who had revealed a hidden strength that could not be denied. She held his hand as they stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the stars, and for the first time she felt that perhaps the war was not hopeless after all. Daniel looked at the same stars and thought silently. He had revealed only a glimpse of his strength. The true test was still ahead, and when it came, he knew he would have to give everything. For the queen, for the empire, and for the future of both their peoples. The Starborn Empire had won a victory, but it was only a small light in a sea of darkness. The Iron Dominion was not broken. It was only angered. Warlord Korvac gathered his forces in greater numbers than ever before. His fleet stretched across the void like an endless storm, their weapons shining with cruel fire. He swore that he would crush Queen Alira, burn her empire, and show the galaxy that no human could ever change the fate of war. The queen knew the danger. Her spies brought reports of massive gatherings of Dominion ships, more than had ever been seen in one place. Entire worlds had been stripped bare to fuel Korvac's war machine. The empire braced itself for a battle that would decide everything. The capital city of Lumerus became a fortress. Shields were raised, weapons prepared, and citizens trained to defend their homes if the enemy reached the surface. The queen stood among her soldiers, her silver eyes shining with determination. She spoke to them in the grand square, her voice echoing across the city. The enemy comes with fire and iron, she said. But we are not afraid. We are the Starborn. We will not kneel. We will not break. This is our home, and we will fight for it. The soldiers roared in answer, their voices shaking the air. But even as courage filled the square, fear lingered in the shadows of their hearts. They had seen the endless numbers of the Dominion. They knew how many worlds had already fallen. Daniel stood near the queen, watching her speak. He admired her strength, but he also saw the weariness hidden in her eyes. He knew she carried the burden of an entire empire. He also knew the storm that was about to fall upon them would test them beyond anything they had faced before. The day came when the skies above Lumerus darkened. The Dominion fleet arrived, a sea of iron ships that blotted out the stars. Their engines thundered, their weapons glowed, and their formation stretched further than the eye could see. The city shook as the first shots struck the shields, sending waves of energy across the surface. The Queen commanded her fleet from the royal flagship. Starborn ships launched in brilliant formation, their weapons blazing. The battle that followed was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Thousands of ships clashed in fire and fury. Explosions lit the void like stars being born and dying all at once. For hours the battle raged. The Queen fought with all her might, her voice calm over the command channels, guiding her forces with precision. But the Dominion's numbers were overwhelming. For every enemy ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. Slowly, painfully, the Starborn fleet was pushed back. Inside the capital, the people huddled in shelters, listening to the distant thunder of war. The ground shook with every impact, and fear filled their hearts. Many wondered if this would be their last day. On the command deck, the Queen's face grew grim. Reports flooded in of destroyed ships, fallen defenses, and fleets unable to regroup. The red lights on the war map spread wider and wider, pressing closer to the capital. Her generals shouted, some calling for retreat, others demanding desperate charges. The Queen's voice remained firm, but even she felt the weight of despair pressing down. It was in this moment of crisis that Daniel stepped forward. His eyes burned with a fire none had seen before. He looked at the map, at the chaos of the battle, and he knew that the time for patience was over. Listen to me, he said, his voice steady and commanding. You cannot win this battle with numbers. You cannot win by matching them ship for ship. But you can win with unity. You can win with spirit. The Dominion believes they have already broken you. Prove them wrong. The generals turned to him, stunned. For the first time, they did not see just a human consort. They saw a leader. Daniel raised his voice, his words carrying across the command deck. The Starborn are strong, but strength alone is not enough. Today, you must fight not only with weapons but with heart. Fight as if every breath matters, as if every moment is the one that decides the future. Show them that you will never bend, never kneel, never surrender. His words spread like fire through the fleet. Officers repeated them across channels, soldiers whispered them in their cockpits, and citizens in shelters heard them echo on the airwaves. A roar rose from the Starborn, a roar of defiance. The Queen looked at Daniel, her heart struck by the power of his spirit. In his voice, she heard the will of humanity, a will that could not be measured by strength of body or size of fleet. She felt her own courage rise higher, burning brighter than before. Then let us fight as one, she declared, her voice carrying across the fleet. Together, with one heart, we will hold our world. The battle changed. Starborn ships no longer fought as scattered defenders. They moved as a single force, striking in unity. Small squadrons broke through Dominion lines with daring maneuvers, guided by Daniel's tactics. The enemy, used to crushing foes with sheer power, stumbled in confusion as the Starborn refused to break. But Korvac himself entered the battle. His massive flagship cut through the field like a blade, its weapons tearing apart anything in its path. His voice thundered across the channels, mocking the Queen and her human husband. You think your spirit will save you? I will show the galaxy the weakness of both your worlds. His flagship pressed forward, driving straight toward the Queen's command ship. The shields shook under the fire, alarms blared, and the hull groaned with each strike. The generals panicked, urging retreat. But Alira stood tall, her eyes fierce. At her side, Daniel did not waver. He placed his hand on hers and said, This is the breaking point. Do not yield. Stand tall, and your people will stand with you. She looked at him and saw no fear, only unshakable resolve. She nodded, and together they gave the order to press forward. The starborn fleet gathered around their queen, forming a shield wall of ships. They fought with every ounce of strength, every drop of courage. The skies blazed with fire as they held the line. For hours, the battle raged at the brink of destruction. By the end, the Queen's flagship still stood. The Dominion had not broken the capital. Korvac's forces pulled back, though not defeated, and the skies fell into uneasy silence. The Queen breathed heavily, her armor scorched, her body weary. She turned to Daniel, who stood tall despite the storm they had faced. In her heart, she knew that it was his spirit, his words, his strength that had held them together at the breaking point. The war was not over. The Dominion would return with even greater fury. But the Queen no longer doubted. She had seen the true strength of her human husband, a strength that no enemy could crush. The Battle of Lumerus had ended, but the wounds of war remained fresh. The skies were quiet now, yet the people could still feel the echoes of thunder in their bones. The capital stood, but only barely. Whole districts had been shattered by falling wreckage, and thousands of lives had been lost. Fires still burned in the countryside, and the space above the planet was littered with broken ships, drifting like dead stars. The Queen walked through the streets of her city. She did not ride in her carriage or wear her crown. She wore the plain armor of her soldiers, marked with ash and dust. Citizens bowed as she passed, but she stopped often, lifting their heads with her hands. She told them they had fought with honor, that their courage had saved the empire. But in her heart, she knew the truth. Without Daniel, without his voice and his fire, they would have broken. Daniel walked beside her, silent at first. He saw the ruins and the scars, and he felt both pride and sorrow. Humanity had always known hardship. On Earth, history was filled with wars, disasters, and trials. But humans had survived, always rising again, always fighting for tomorrow. He felt that same spirit in the starborn people, but they had never faced an enemy like the Dominion. He knew that if they were to win, they would need more than courage. They would need something deeper, something only humanity could give. In the days that followed, the Queen gathered her council. The generals demanded stronger fleets, more weapons, and new fortresses. The scholars spoke of diplomacy and hidden alliances. The people whispered of fear, wondering if the next Dominion strike would be their last. The Queen listened to all of them, but her eyes often drifted to Daniel. She had learned that his words carried a different kind of power, one that reached beyond numbers and plans. At last, she turned to him. "What does your heart tell you, Daniel? What path must we take now?" He stood, looking at the gathered leaders. "You cannot fight this war alone. The Dominion will keep coming, and no single empire can resist them forever. But there is one thing they fear, one thing they cannot understand. Unity. Humanity has always been small compared to the vastness of the galaxy, but when we stand together, our voice shakes the stars. It is time for that voice to be heard here." The council fell silent. The generals frowned, confused. The scholars leaned forward, curious. Daniel continued. "We must call to every world that has suffered under the Dominion. We must show them that resistance is not hopeless. They must hear us roar, not as starborn, not as humans, but as free people of the galaxy. That roar will bring allies. That roar will break chains." The Queen looked at him with shining eyes. She understood. She rose from her seat and declared, "Then let the galaxy hear us. Let the roar of freedom rise from Lumerus." Messengers were sent across the stars. Not only to friendly worlds, but to conquered planets, to hidden colonies, to refugee fleets wandering in the dark. The message was simple. The Dominion could be resisted. The Queen's people had faced the storm and survived. The human consort had spoken of unity, and his words had lit a fire in the hearts of many. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, answers came back. At first only whispers, then louder voices. A mining colony on the edge of the void pledged ships. A group of refugees sent their fighters. A planet once crushed under Dominion rule rose in rebellion and sent word of victory. Piece by piece, the spark grew into flame. The Queen watched the reports with wonder, but Daniel only nodded. He knew that once hope was awakened, it spread faster than any fire. Humanity had always carried that lesson, and now it was reaching across the stars. But Korvac was not blind. The warlord saw the growing unity and raged with fury. He unleashed his hunters, sending fleets to silence the rising voices. Entire worlds burned again, their cries cut short. He sent messages of his own, filled with threats and promises of endless chains. His plan was to crush hope before it became too strong. The Queen and her council debated how to respond. Some urged caution, fearing that the rebellion was still too fragile. Others demanded immediate war. Once again, it was Daniel who rose and spoke. "They want us to be afraid. They want us to believe we cannot win. But the time for hiding is over. The time for silence is over. If the Dominion wishes to hear our answer, let us give it to them. Let us gather every ship, every soldier, every voice, and let us roar so loud that even the darkest corners of the galaxy hear us." The human roar is not only sound. It is the cry of survival, the cry of defiance. It is the truth that no empire of chains can erase. The Queen placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "Then let us roar together." And so, preparations began for a great gathering. Not just a battle, but a declaration. Fleets from many worlds came to Lumerus, banners flying, weapons ready. The city that had been wounded by fire now shone with hope. Refugees who had once fled in silence now marched in the streets, chanting for freedom. The capital became not just a fortress, but a beacon. When the day of the gathering came, the Queen stood before the largest assembly the galaxy had seen in generations. Her silver eyes shone as she spoke. "Today, we do not stand as one empire. We stand as one people. The Dominion has tried to break us, but we are unbroken. They tried to silence us, but our voices rise together. And now, with one heart, with one will, we roar for freedom." She turned to Daniel, and he stepped forward. His voice carried across the fleet, across the stars, through every channel. "We are human. We are starborn. We are free. To every soul that hears my voice, know this truth. The Dominion can burn worlds, but they cannot burn our spirit. The Dominion can chain bodies, but they cannot chain the will of the free. Rise with us. Stand with us. Roar with us. Today we are not weak. Today we are the storm." A thunderous cry rose from the fleets, from the city, from every world that listened. It shook the heavens, it carried across the stars, and even the Dominion hunters who lurked at the edge of the void felt it strike their hearts. The roar of humanity, joined with the roar of the starborn, became one voice. The galaxy had changed. The fire of rebellion was no longer a whisper. It was a storm. The queen looked at Daniel with pride and love. She had seen his true strength again. Not in weapons, not in power, but in spirit. The human roar had awakened a galaxy. And in the shadows, far away, Korvac clenched his fists. He knew that the final battle was coming. The roar of unity had shaken the galaxy. Worlds that once bowed in silence to the Iron Dominion now rose in defiance. Colonies long thought broken lit their skies with fire and banners of freedom. Refugees returned as warriors. Fleets gathered from every corner, answering the call of the Queen and the voice of her human consort. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion felt the galaxy itself turning against them. But Korvac was not a warlord who bent easily. He was the Fist of Iron, the master of chains, the destroyer of worlds. To him, rebellion was not new. He had crushed it many times before. Yet never had it burned this bright, never had it spread so fast. He knew the cause. It was not only the Queen who inspired the people. It was the human by her side. The human who spoke with a fire no alien could match. Korvac swore that he would silence that voice, no matter the cost. He gathered his full strength. Every ship of the Dominion, every soldier, every weapon was drawn together. The fleet was so vast that it covered the void like a black sea. Its engines roared like thunder, and its weapons gleamed with deadly fire. This was not only a campaign. This was the last stand of the Dominion. The Queen and Daniel stood on the command deck of the royal flagship. Before them, the war map shone with countless red lights marking the Dominion fleet. It was a sight that could freeze the bravest heart. Yet Daniel did not look afraid. His eyes burned with steady fire, the same fire that had carried them this far. The Queen turned to him. "This is the storm that will decide all. If we fall, the galaxy will fall with us. If we stand, the Dominion will break forever." Daniel nodded. "Then we will stand. Not as starborn, not as human, but as one people. This is not their galaxy to rule. It is ours to protect." The order was given. The united fleet surged into battle. The clash was like the tearing of the heavens. Thousands of ships fired in a storm of light and flame. Explosions rippled across the void as fighters darted through the chaos. Massive warships exchanged blows that shook space itself. Every world, every people, every banner that had risen for freedom was present, and their voices roared through the channels. The Dominion fought with savage might. Their discipline was cruel but strong, their weapons unmatched in size. Many brave ships were lost, swallowed by fire. Yet the rebels fought on, refusing to bend. For every ally that fell, two more pressed forward, driven by hope and fury. On the front lines, the Queen's flagship shone like a beacon. She gave commands with calm strength, guiding fleets with skill. Her silver eyes burned with determination, but it was Daniel's voice that carried through the channels, keeping the spirit of the fighters alive. "Hold the line. Do not give ground. Remember why you fight. Remember who you fight for. Every world, every family, every dream rests on this moment. Do not yield." The words cut through fear and filled the hearts of warriors with fire. Ships that were near breaking fought on. Fighters low on fuel dove into battle once more. The roar of humanity, joined with the roar of the starborn, thundered across the battlefield. But Korvac himself entered the fight. His flagship, the Iron Fang, was larger than any other vessel. Its weapons tore apart rebel squadrons with a single strike. Its armor withstood the heaviest bombardment. And his voice carried across every channel, cold and merciless. "Fools! You think your weak voices matter. You think hope can defeat iron. I will crush you. I will burn your worlds until nothing remains. And you, human, will be the first to kneel before me. His ship cut straight toward the Queen's flagship, firing with unending fury. Shields buckled. Systems failed. The hull groaned under the terrible assault. The council urged retreat, but Daniel stood firm. No. If we run now, we lose everything. This ends here. Today the Dominion breaks, or we fall together. But we will not kneel. The Queen looked at him and saw the unshakable will in his eyes. She gave the order. All ships, rally to us. Protect the flagship. Break the Iron Fang. The fleets obeyed. Ships formed a shield wall around the flagship, taking blows meant for their queen. Fighters swarmed like fireflies, striking at the Dominion giant. Wave after wave hit the Iron Fang, but still it advanced, unyielding. At last, Daniel made his choice. He turned to the Queen and said, "Open the path. I will lead the strike." Her eyes widened. "It is madness. You will not return." He smiled softly. "I am human. We do not win by numbers or power. We win by spirit. And today, the spirit of humanity will break the Dominion." Before she could stop him, he entered a strike craft. It was small, fast, and armed for one purpose. As the battle raged, he flew into the storm, dodging fire and weaving through wreckage. Dominion ships tried to cut him down, but Allied fighters cleared his path, sacrificing themselves so he could press forward. The Queen's voice trembled as she gave the order. "All ships, cover him. Let no enemy touch him. He carries our hope." Daniel pushed the craft toward the heart of the Iron Fang. Alarms screamed, the hull burned, but he did not falter. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp. At the last moment, he activated the overload. The small craft became a spear of fire. The strike hit the Iron Fang at its core. The explosion was like a second sun in the void. The great warship shook, its armor splitting, its weapons falling silent. Then, with a thunder that shook the stars, the Iron Fang tore apart in a blaze of light. Korvac's roar of rage echoed across the channels, then vanished in silence. The Dominion flagship was gone. The battlefield froze. For a moment, both sides stared in shock. Then the roar came. From the rebels, from every ship, from every world, the cry of victory filled the void. The Dominion, broken and leaderless, scattered in chaos. Their fleets fled, their chains shattered. The war was over. On the flagship, the Queen stood silent, tears shining in her eyes. She had seen Daniel's sacrifice. She had felt his spirit burning brighter than any star. He was gone, but his voice still lived in the hearts of all who fought. She spoke to the fleet, her voice strong though her heart ached. "He was human. He was my husband. And his roar has given us freedom. Let the galaxy never forget what spirit can do. Let the name of Daniel be carried in every song of victory. The Dominion has fallen. The stars are free." The fleets answered with a thunderous cry. The war was won. The galaxy was changed. And though the Queen stood alone, she knew she carried within her the strength of the one who had shown them all the true power of humanity. The human roar would never be silenced.